In October of 1587, inside a Medici villa in the hills outside Florence, two people were dying in the same house at the same time. The Grand Duke of Tuscany, Francesco de' Medici, one of the most powerful men in Europe, lay burning with fever. In another room, his wife Bianca was burning with the very same fever. For 11 days they wasted away. On the 19th, Francesco died. The next morning, Bianca followed him. And within hours, before the bodies were even cold, all of Florence was whispering a single word: poison. Everyone knew who to blame: the Grand Duke's own brother, a cardinal who had everything to gain and who had visited the couple just before they fell ill. For more than 400 years, history recorded him as the murderer. There was only one problem. In 2026, scientists opened the Medici tomb, extracted DNA from the bones, and found the real killer still hiding inside them. And it was not the man the world had condemned. To understand why an entire city was so certain of murder, you have to understand the man they accused. His name was Ferdinando de' Medici, Francesco's younger brother, and a cardinal of the church. On the surface, a holy man. Underneath, a Medici, born into the most ruthless political dynasty of the Renaissance. A family that had turned poison, banking and betrayal into instruments of power. And Ferdinando had a motive so clean it reads like a screenplay. Francesco had no legitimate son. If he died childless, the throne of Tuscany passed to Ferdinando. But there was a threat. Bianca, the wife Florence despised, a Venetian outsider they saw as a scheming commoner. The fear was that Bianca might smuggle in a false heir and lock Ferdinando out of the succession forever. So when Ferdinando arrived to visit his brother, and days later that brother and his hated wife were both dead, the conclusion wrote itself. He had the motive, he had the access, and he inherited everything. Remember that word, inherited. It matters more than it looks. The problem with a story this perfect is that people stop questioning it. Ferdinando took the throne, became Grand Duke of Tuscany, and the whisper of poison hardened into accepted fact. For centuries, historians repeated it. Arsenic, the Renaissance weapon of choice, tasteless, patient, easy to hide in wine. It fit everything Europe believed about the Medici. And here is where the case takes its strangest turn. Because in 2006, over 400 years later, a team of scientists exhumed Francesco's remains, ran a toxicology analysis, and announced that they had found it: arsenic in his body. For a moment it seemed science itself had confirmed the murder. The headlines were triumphant. The Medici poisoning was real. The brother was guilty after all. But other researchers weren't convinced. The arsenic levels were ambiguous. Renaissance medicine used arsenic as a treatment, and the symptoms, the specific grinding pattern of that 11-day death, didn't quite match poison at all. To settle it, someone would have to ask the bones a different question. Not what was around them, what was inside them. That is exactly what a team from Yale University and the University of Pisa set out to do. Their target was the Medici chapels in Florence, where the dynasty lies entombed in marble and gold. They didn't need much, just a fragment of rib from Francesco and from another brother, Giovanni, a cardinal who had died young back in 1562. And they weren't looking for poison this time. They were looking for a passenger. Because when a parasite invades your blood, it leaves its own genetic signature behind. DNA that is not yours, woven into your remains, waiting centuries for someone to read it. If Francesco had been murdered, the bones would be silent. But if something else had killed him, something alive, it would still be in there. The question was whether anything could survive 400 years inside a rib bone in a Florentine crypt. Something had survived. When the results came back, the bones were not silent at all. Inside the remains of both brothers, the team found the genetic fingerprint of a killer. Plasmodium falciparum, the deadliest species of the malaria parasite. From Giovanni's rib alone, they recovered nearly 1,900 base pairs of parasite DNA, even carrying 2 mutations never seen before in any known strain. Francesco's bones told the same story. Not arsenic, not his brother, malaria. And once you know that, the whole scene rearranges itself. That villa where they died, Poggio a Caiano, sat in a landscape of marshes and rice fields, the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. The 11 days of recurring fever the physicians described had a name in central Italy at the time: febbre terzana, the local word for malaria. The clues had been sitting in plain sight for 4 centuries. The world had simply been looking at the wrong suspect. Now, a careful word, because this is where good history and cheap history part ways. The DNA does not hand us a signed confession. That 2006 arsenic result still hangs in the record, and science reaches its conclusions in layers, not lightning bolts. But this is the most direct evidence anyone has ever produced. Not a symptom, not a rumor, but the murderer's own genetic material, recovered from the victim's bones. And it points away from Ferdinando, which forces us to look again at the man we condemned. Ferdinando did inherit the throne. He did have the motive. By every rule of a good story, he was guilty. But motive is not murder, and for 400 years, we mistook one for the other. We wanted a villain in cardinal's robes, because that is a better story than a mosquito. History rarely forgives the man who benefits from a death. Science this time finally did. And this is bigger than clearing one Renaissance duke. Think about how many murders fill our history books. The convenient deaths, the rivals who died at the perfect moment, the poisonings everyone simply knew were true. How many of those were real, and how many were just malaria or typhoid or an infected wound, dressed up by the living into a tale of betrayal because the truth was too ordinary to bear? For 4 centuries, Ferdinando de' Medici stood accused of the one crime he almost certainly did not commit. It took a rib bone, a research lab, and a parasite frozen in time to give him back his innocence. The Medici built their empire on gold, on cunning, and on the fear of the poisoned cup. In the end, the thing that brought down their Grand Duke wasn't a rival, or an assassin, or a drop of arsenic in the wine. It was an insect small enough to sit on the rim of that cup. And history spent 400 years blaming the wrong killer. 6 of these Medici now have their story corrected by science that didn't exist when they died. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If the DNA can overturn a 400-year-old murder case, how many other certainties in our history are just stories we told because they sounded better than the truth? Tell me in the comments which historical death you think science should reopen next. And if you want to watch the past get rewritten one cold case at a time, subscribe, because that's exactly what we do here. Until the next case.